The cheerful, plastic-coated scream of the Space Voyager ride was abruptly cut short, replaced by a ragged, guttural shriek that clawed at the humid afternoon air. One moment the world was a riot of synthetic joy, the cloying sweetness of spun sugar, the insistent thrum of distant pop music, the giddy laughter of children, including my daughter Lily, who was currently dragging me towards the enchanted forest petting zoo. The next, it was a sudden, violent tear in the fabric of reality. My hand tightened on Lily's small, sticky one. She was 7, all pigtails and boundless energy, wearing a bright pink t-shirt that said, Princess of Adventureland. Her grip was firm, trusting, too trusting for what was about to happen. "Daddy, did you hear that?" she asked, her big brown eyes, usually alight with excitement, now wide with a flicker of unease. "It sounded like a monster." I chuckled, trying to reassure her, trying to reassure myself. "Just someone having too much fun on the roller coaster, sweetie. You know how those teenagers scream." But the knot in my stomach was already tightening. That wasn't a fun scream. It was raw, primal. And it wasn't coming from the direction of the Space Voyager's launch tower, but from the crowded thoroughfare near the main gates. Another scream followed, closer this time, and then a chorus of them, mixed with shouts of confusion and panic. The pop music on the park speakers suddenly warped, skipping like a scratched CD, before cutting out altogether. A wave of unease rippled through the tightly packed crowd around us. People stopped, turning their heads, craning their necks. Conversations died. The clatter of the nearby carousel became unnervingly loud in the sudden strange silence. Then I saw him. He emerged from behind the giant, smiling mascot statue of Adventure Owl, the park's beaver character. A man in a bright yellow polo shirt, one of the park's many employees. But he wasn't smiling. His face was contorted, jaw hanging slack, eyes wide and bloodshot. There was blood, a dark, glistening smear, coating the side of his cheek and dripping from his chin. He moved with a sickening, lurching shuffle, arms outstretched, not towards us, but towards a young couple pushing a stroller. A woman shrieked, a high, piercing sound that cut through the momentary stunned silence. The employee lunged. It wasn't human, not anymore. Not with that terrifying, hungry snarl ripping from his throat. He grabbed the man with the stroller, sinking his teeth into his neck with a wet, tearing sound that I'll hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. The world exploded into chaos. People screamed, a collective wail of pure, unadulterated terror. The crowd, dense and festive just seconds before, became a swirling, desperate mass. Everyone was pushing, shoving, trying to get away. The sweet smell of cotton candy was rapidly being overtaken by the acrid stench of fear and something metallic, something like fresh blood. "Daddy, what's happening?" Lily's voice was high-pitched, panicked. She was clutching my hand with both of hers, her small body trembling. "Stay with me, Lily! Hold on tight!" I yelled, pulling her against my leg, trying to shield her from the unfolding nightmare. More of them were appearing now, emerging from the crowd, from behind souvenir kiosks, from the shadows of brightly painted buildings. People who had been laughing and enjoying their day were now staggering, lurching, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of hunger. Their clothes were torn, their skin an awful mottled gray. The sheer speed of the transformation was terrifying. One bite, that's all it took. The man who had been bitten by the park employee was already on his knees, jerking spasmodically, his hands clawing at his own throat. His wife was screaming, trying to pull him away, but it was too late. His eyes rolled back, then snapped forward, wide and vacant, fixed on her. He lunged, a mirroring image of the first attacker. The zombie apocalypse wasn't some distant threat on a TV screen. It was here, now, at Adventureland, the happiest place on Earth, and I was in the middle of it. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through me. I had to get Lily out. I had to find a way through this surging, screaming mass of humanity and nascent monsters. My eyes darted frantically, searching for an escape route, a direction. The main gates were behind us, but they were now a maelstrom of terror, a bottleneck of desperate people trying to push through, only to be met by more of the turning, biting dead. "To the right, Lily! We need to go right!" I shouted, yanking her arm, forcing us against the flow of traffic. To the right was the enchanted forest, a dense cluster of trees and smaller, slower rides for younger kids. Maybe less crowded, maybe. A woman, her face smeared with blood, stumbled directly into my path, her hand reaching for me. Her teeth were bared, a horrifying, inhuman grin. I reacted purely on instinct, shoving her with my free hand. She was surprisingly strong, unyielding. Her fingers brushed my chest, her breath, foul and metallic, washed over my face. I could see the milky film in her eyes, the dark, bruised skin. This was real. This was the end. "Daddy, run!" Lily shrieked, her voice cracking. Her small hand was torn from mine by the surging crowd. 1 second she was there, a lifeline, a reason to fight. The next she was gone, swallowed by the panicked throng. "Lily!" My voice was a raw, guttural cry, lost in the din. I spun around, desperate, calling her name, pushing back against the torrent of bodies. "Lily, where are you?" My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. A cold sweat drenched me, stinging my eyes. The world blurred. I could see her bright pink shirt for a fleeting second, a flash of color in the sea of gray and terror, being pulled away, smaller and smaller, towards the enchanted forest entrance. No, 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 this couldn't be happening. Not here, not now. I fought against the current, shoving, elbowing, ignoring the angry shouts and desperate pleas of others. Every fiber of my being was screaming to reach her. I tripped over something or someone and went down hard, scraping my knee on the rough pavement. The crowd surged over me, a stampede of fear. For a terrifying moment, I thought I would be crushed, trampled. But the sheer momentum of their flight carried me a few feet. Then I scrambled back to my feet, gasping for air, vision still fixed on that fading pink dot. The first infected caught my periphery. A man in a blue polo, his jaw ripped open, his mouth a bloody cavern, was tearing at the arm of a screaming child. Another, a woman with a half-eaten hot dog still clutched in her hand, stumbled towards me, making a wet, gurgling sound. They were everywhere. My mind raced, fragmented, screaming. Lily! I had to get to Lily! I pushed forward, no longer caring who I shoved, who I stepped on. My focus was singular, laser-sharp. The pink t-shirt. It was heading into the enchanted forest. I had to follow. The entrance to the enchanted forest was a whimsical archway shaped like a giant, grinning mushroom. Now it was a funnel of terror. People were piling into it, desperate to escape the main thoroughfare. More infected were already inside, their moans echoing strangely amidst the cartoonish trees and oversized flowers. I saw her again, just for a moment, her small figure pressed against the side of a brightly painted toadstool, looking utterly lost and terrified. My heart twisted in my chest. "Lily, stay there! I'm coming!" I screamed, but she didn't seem to hear me, or perhaps the fear was too great. She pushed herself forward, disappearing deeper into the colorful yet now sinister woods. I plunged into the enchanted forest, the air instantly thicker, smelling of damp earth and decay, strangely mingled with the plastic-sweet scent of kids' sunscreen. The cheerful, oversized flowers seemed to mock me, their bright colors now grotesque under the pall of horror. The once charming sound effects of chirping birds and bubbling brooks were now overlaid with sickening gurgles and the ragged, breathy moans of the infected. My vision was narrowed, tunnel-like, focused only on finding my daughter. The path ahead was winding, designed for leisurely strolls, but now it was a gauntlet. People were running, stumbling, falling. I saw a discarded stroller, its wheels still spinning idly, tipped over. A single, small, brightly colored shoe lay beside it. My stomach clenched. I had to move faster. I had to. A shadow detached itself from behind a giant fiberglass ladybug. It was another one. A park guest, perhaps. A teenager, judging by the torn graphic tee. Its movements were unnatural, jerky, but terrifyingly swift. It lunged, its hands reaching. I had nothing, no weapon, just my bare hands, my panicked mind, and the primal urge to protect my child. Pure adrenaline surged through me. As it came at me, I saw a discarded selfie stick on the ground, a bright pink one, fittingly. I snatched it up, my grip tight on the flimsy plastic. It was a pathetic excuse for a weapon, but it was something. The infected was almost on me. Its rotting breath was hot on my face. I swung the selfie stick wildly, desperately. It connected with a sickening thwack against the side of its head. The plastic bent, but the impact sent the creature stumbling, giving me a precious second. I didn't wait. I didn't look back. I just ran, my legs pumping, my lungs burning. Lily! I kept calling her name, hoping against hope that she would hear me, that she would respond. The sounds of the theme park zombie apocalypse were all around me now, the incessant moaning, the occasional choked scream, the frantic rush of unseen feet. Each sound was a stab of dread, tightening the noose around my hope. I rounded a bend in the path and saw it. The petting zoo. A small, open-air enclosure designed to look like a rustic barn, surrounded by a low wooden fence. Lily had been so excited to see the goats and sheep. Now it was a scene of unspeakable horror. The gate was partially open, allowing a steady stream of infected to shamble in and out. Inside, a group of what looked like park staff, still in their khaki uniforms, were being torn apart by the reanimated animals. Goats, their eyes glazed and blank, their mouths smeared with blood, were gnawing at human limbs. Sheep, usually so docile, bleated with a new ravenous hunger. My mind reeled. Even the animals? This wasn't just a virus, it was an all-consuming plague. The world was truly ending. I scanned the horrifying scene, my heart in my throat. No sign of Lily. Thank God, she couldn't be here. She couldn't have seen this. I had to bypass the petting zoo. The path continued past it, winding deeper into the enchanted forest. I kept my back to the fence, trying to make myself small, trying to be invisible. The stench of blood and animal musk was overwhelming. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, trying to clear the images, trying to focus. Find Lily. Just find Lily. The selfie stick felt utterly useless in my hand. What was I going to do against these things? Against anything? I was just a dad, a marketing executive, for crying out loud. My biggest concern this morning was whether I'd remember to pack enough sunscreen. Now, it was survival. I heard a small whimper. It wasn't human. It was thin, reedy, like a frightened animal. I froze, every nerve ending screaming. It came from deeper in the woods, just beyond the petting zoo. A faint rustle. My first thought, Lily. My second thought, is it an infected animal? My third, most terrifying thought, what if she's with one of them? I moved slowly, cautiously, my plastic weapon held out in front of me like a divining rod. The ground was soft here, covered in fallen leaves and pine needles. Every step felt impossibly loud. The sound of the whimper came again, slightly louder, but still not human. I pushed aside a drooping branch of fake ivy and saw it. Tucked away beneath a giant, smiling plastic sunflower was a small, brown goat. It was tied to a stake in the ground, its rope still secure. Its leg was mangled, a jagged, bloody wound oozing onto the dirt. It whimpered again, a pathetic, broken sound. My breath hitched. This was an uninfected animal. It was hurt, and more importantly, it was alive. A tiny, fragile beacon of the world that was. My heart ached for it, but I couldn't help it. I had to focus on Lily. I had to keep moving. The presence of the uninfected goat, however, confirmed a terrifying new reality. The zombie virus wasn't just affecting people. I continued deeper into the enchanted forest. The path opened up into a small clearing, dominated by a gentle spinning ride shaped like giant mushrooms, the fungi round. It was still operating, slowly rotating, its cheerful music tinny and distorted, like a broken music box. But there were no children on it. Only an adult, slumped forward, tied into one of the seats, his head lolling at an unnatural angle. A small bite mark on his neck was already turning black. He was dead, or worse. A flicker of pink caught my eye. My blood ran cold, then hot with a frantic surge of hope. It was Lily's backpack, lying discarded near the edge of the fungi round, nestled beside a colorful trash can shaped like a gnome. Her favorite, sparkly purple backpack. "Lily!" I screamed, my voice raw. I ran towards it, stumbling over fake roots and decorative pebbles. My eyes scanned the area wildly. "Lily, where are you?" The fungi go-round warped again, then picked up speed, the mechanism groaning. The ride began to spin faster, faster, the dead man on it blurring into a horrifying smear. Something clicked in my brain. The emergency stop. There had to be an emergency stop. I reached the backpack. It was open, its contents spilled out. A half-eaten bag of animal crackers, a crayon, a small worn plush unicorn. No Lily. My heart sank. Then I saw something else. A small muddy footprint, barely visible on the soft ground near the ride's control panel. It was small, too small for an adult. It was Lily's. It led towards a cluster of brightly painted toadstool houses, part of the ride's scenery, that lined the edge of the clearing. Hope, fragile and desperate, sparked within me. She was hiding. She had to be. I moved towards the toadstool houses, my hands shaking, the selfie stick a mere twig in my grasp. Each step was agony, each breath a prayer. The fungi around spun faster and faster, its music a manic, out-of-tune chorus to my escalating terror. The dead man on it was a blur of blue shirt and gray skin, his head flopping with a centrifugal force. "Lily, are you in there, sweetie?" I whispered, my voice barely audible above the ride. I peered into the first toadstool house. Empty. Just a cobweb-filled interior and the faint smell of plastic. The second. Empty. The third. As I approached the fourth, I heard it. A soft, terrified sniffle. "Lily." My voice was hoarse. A tiny, choked sob. It was her. Oh God, it was her. I pushed open the lightweight plastic door. Inside, curled up in a tiny ball behind a fake plastic mushroom, was Lily. Her face was streaked with tears and dirt, her small body trembling uncontrollably. Her pigtails were coming undone. Her eyes, wide and terrified, met mine. "Daddy!" she cried, a sound that ripped through my very soul. She launched herself at me, burying her face in my chest, clutching my shirt with all her might. I pulled her into a tight embrace, burying my face in her soft hair, inhaling the scent of her, the smell of my world. My little girl. She was safe. She was alive. For this moment, that was all that mattered. "It's okay, baby. Daddy's here. You're safe," I murmured, my voice thick with unshed tears. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. We weren't safe. We were in a theme park, surrounded by the shambling dead, and the sun was beginning its slow descent towards the horizon, painting the sky in ominous hues of orange and red. The zombie apocalypse was just getting started, and we were trapped in its whimsical heart. The fungi around continued to spin, its cheerful, broken music a discordant soundtrack to our reunion. The dead man on it, a silent, grotesque passenger, whirled endlessly. I had to get us out of here. But where and how? The toadstool house was flimsy, offering no real protection. The sounds of the infected were getting closer, the moaning more insistent. They were drawn to sound, to movement, to life. My frantic call for Lily, her cries, they would have heard. We needed a plan. Fast. "Daddy, what are those things?" Lily whispered, her voice muffled against my chest, her body still trembling. She hadn't seen the truly horrific parts, not yet, but she'd seen enough to know something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. "They're sick people, sweetie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to find words that wouldn't terrify her further. "Very sick. We need to be quiet and get away from them." She nodded, pressing closer. Her small hand found mine and clung to it, a lifeline for both of us. The fungi-go-round sputtered, then abruptly stopped. The music cut out. The sudden silence was deafening, amplifying the distant moans. The dead man on the ride was now clearly visible, his head lolling, eyes staring into the darkening sky. The silence was short-lived. A new sound joined the symphony of dread, a low growl, closer than before, coming from the edge of the clearing near the path we had just taken. My breath hitched. They were here. "Okay, Lily, listen to me," I whispered, pulling back slightly so I could look into her eyes. They were still wide, still filled with fear, but there was also a glimmer of trust, of hope in them. "We need to be super quiet, like ninjas, okay? And we need to move fast. Can you do that for Daddy?" She nodded, biting her lip. "Yes, Daddy." "Good girl." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my own racing heart. The selfie stick was still in my hand. It wouldn't do much, but it was all I had. I needed a real weapon, a heavier weapon. My eyes darted around the clearing. The fungi-go-round's control panel. Maybe a wrench or a loose pipe. But there was no time. The growl was louder, accompanied by the distinctive, dragging shuffle of feet. A shadow detached itself from the edge of the clearing, one of them. Then another, and another. They were drawn to the silenced ride, to the scent of living flesh. "Hold my hand, tight," I whispered to Lily. "When I say run, you run as fast as you can. Don't look back, okay? Just run." "Where?" Her voice was small but clear. "Towards the big castle," I said, pointing vaguely towards the towering spires of the King Arthur's Quest ride, visible in the distance above the trees. It was a thrill ride, a massive, imposing structure that might offer some kind of high ground, some kind of defense, or at least a different direction from here. "It's very far, but we need to go that way. You run as fast as you can, okay?" She nodded, her grip on my hand tightening until her knuckles were white. The first infected shuffled into the clearing, its head twitching, its blank eyes scanning. It caught sight of us. A low moan rumbled in its throat, and it started to move, slow at first, then picking up speed. Two more followed, lumbering figures joining the grim pursuit. "Now, Lily, run!" I shouted, pushing her gently forward. She didn't hesitate. Her small legs pumped, carrying her across the clearing and into the winding path on the other side. I followed, but glanced back, clutching the selfie stick. The three infected were coming, their movements uncoordinated but relentless. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was slow, too slow. I needed to buy Lily time. I scanned the immediate area. The fungi-go-round, the control panel. A small maintenance door was ajar, half hidden behind the panel. An idea, desperate and probably suicidal, sparked in my mind. "Lily, keep going! Don't stop!" I screamed, hoping she heard me. Then, instead of following her, I veered sharply, directly towards the fungi-go-round. The infected turned, their moans rising in pitch, their attention shifting to me. Perfect, that's what I wanted. I slammed into the control panel, fumbling for the emergency stop button, praying it would still work. My fingers found the large red button, and I slapped it. Nothing. The ride was dead. The power was out. Damn it. The first infected was almost on me. I raised the selfie stick, preparing for a futile defense. It was a man, his face half-eaten, his park employee uniform stained with grime and blood. He lunged, his putrid breath hot on my face. Instinct took over. Instead of swinging, I ducked, slipping past him, and jammed the selfie stick into the spokes of the fungi-go-round. The flimsy plastic snapped instantly, but it created a momentary distraction. The infected stumbled, diverted by the new obstacle. I didn't look back. I lunged for the small, half-open maintenance door, squeezing through the narrow gap. The space beyond was dark, cramped, and smelled of ozone and dust. I pulled the door shut behind me with a grunt, fumbling for a latch or a lock. There was a simple bolt. I slid it home. The click was loud in the sudden claustrophobic silence. Outside, I heard them. The dull thuds of their bodies hitting the door, their moans echoing through the thin metal. They knew I was here. They could smell me. But for now, I was safe. For now. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely breathe. The adrenaline was slowly receding, replaced by a crushing wave of terror and profound guilt. Lily. I had sent her off alone. My 7-year-old daughter, running through a zombie-infested theme park towards a giant fake castle. What kind of father was I? But I had to believe she was safer alone, ahead of me, without me as a burden. If I kept her close, fighting, she might get hurt. This way I could try to draw them away, then catch up, right? The darkness pressed in on me. I pulled out my phone. Dead, of course. No signal, battery probably drained from 100 pointless photos taken earlier today. A useless brick. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Where was I? I was in some kind of maintenance access tunnel, probably under the fungi go-round. The air was cool and stale, heavy with the scent of old grease and dust. I could hear the faint scuttling of unseen things in the darkness. Rats, probably, or worse. I felt along the wall, my fingers brushing against cold, rusted pipes and rough concrete. There had to be an exit. There had to be a way out of here, a way to get back to Lily. The thudding on the door outside had subsided. Had they left, or were they just waiting? The silence was almost more terrifying than the noise. My hand brushed against something cold and heavy. I grasped it. A metal pipe, about 2 feet long, jagged at one end. Not ideal, but infinitely better than a selfie stick. It felt solid, reassuringly heavy in my hand. This was it. This was my weapon, my only chance. I took another deep breath, trying to push down the wave of self-loathing that threatened to engulf me. Focus, Mark. Focus on Lily. She needs you. The tunnel stretched out into impenetrable darkness. I started moving, slowly, cautiously, my metal pipe held high, feeling my way along the left wall. The floor was uneven, strewn with debris, broken wires, discarded tools, stagnant puddles that glinted faintly in the almost non-existent light filtering from somewhere far ahead. The thoughts hammered at me. What if she got lost? What if she ran into more of them? What if she's scared, alone, crying? The memory of her small, trembling body in my arms just minutes ago was a sharp, painful contrast to the cold, hard reality of my situation. I could practically feel her absence, a gaping hole in my chest. This was the zombie apocalypse, and I was experiencing it through the most brutal lens imaginable, as a parent separated from their child. I walked for what felt like an eternity, the silence punctuated only by the occasional drip of water, the scuttling sounds, and the frantic thumping of my own heart. The air grew colder, wetter. I could hear the distant rumble of the large rides, the Space Voyager, the King Arthur's quest. The noise was faint, a ghostly echo of the park's former glory. Were they still running? Was the power still on in some sections? A faint light appeared ahead, a sliver of gray at the end of the tunnel. An exit. Hope surged through me, swift and potent. I picked up my pace, adrenaline coursing through my veins once more. As I neared the exit, the light grew brighter, revealing a set of concrete steps leading up. I could hear faint sounds from above, the distinct, wet shuffling that now made my skin crawl. They were there. More of them. Of course they were. I crept up the steps, my heart pounding. The top of the stairs opened into a small, cluttered utility room filled with mops, buckets, and cleaning supplies. A single grimy window looked out onto what appeared to be a backstage area. I peered through the window. It was a narrow alleyway lined with drab industrial buildings. Not the brightly colored, whimsical facades of the park, but the utilitarian underbelly. This was where the magic was made, not where it was seen. Now it was just another path for the dead. At the far end of the alley, a cluster of infected shambled slowly, aimlessly. They were moving away from me, towards what looked like a staff entrance to one of the bigger rides. The King Arthur's Quest, maybe? That was the direction I told Lily to run. A terrifying thought struck me. What if the park staff, the people who worked here, lived here, became infected inside these backstage areas? These tunnels, these rooms, these alleys, they could be crawling with them. This was a whole new level of terror. The familiar, happy place had a hidden industrial nightmare lurking beneath its veneer. I watched the infected move, their gray forms swaying under the darkening sky. They seemed to be drawn to something, a distant, muffled boom that vibrated through the ground. An explosion? Were they bombing the city? Was there even a city left to bomb? The scale of this zombie apocalypse was staggering, incomprehensible. I had to move. I couldn't stay here. Lily was out there, alone. I had to get to her. I scanned the utility room. Besides the pipe, there was nothing else immediately useful. No maps, no first aid, just cleaning supplies. The door to the alley was a heavy steel fire door, secured with a simple bar latch. I could push it open. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This was it, the next phase of the escape. I slowly, carefully pushed the bar latch up. The mechanism groaned, a small sound that seemed to echo loudly in the silence. I braced myself, pipe held high. I flung the door open. The alley was clear for about 50 feet. The cluster of infected at the far end was still there, still moving away. This was my chance. I burst out of the utility room, running as fast as my tired legs would carry me, not looking back. The air in the alley was different, more metallic, less sweet than the main park. A pungent smell of garbage mixed with something distinctly human and foul. I ran past rows of industrial bins, past loading docks, past anonymous service entrances. Each one felt like a potential trap, a hidden den for the undead. My eyes darted everywhere, scanning for movement, for shadows. The alley opened into a wider access road, paved with asphalt. Ahead, I could see the massive structure of King Arthur's Quest, its stone-like facade looming against the twilight sky. It was a replica of a medieval castle, complete with turrets and battlements. My only beacon of hope. I sped up, my focus fixed on the castle. Lily, she had to be there. She had to be safe. Suddenly, a high-pitched, metallic shriek ripped through the air, directly above me. I stumbled, my heart leaping into my throat. The sound was deafening, the piercing wail of a ride's emergency brakes. I looked up. Perched precariously on the highest loop of the Space Voyager roller coaster, its cars frozen mid-descent, was a single car. And in that car, swaying gently in the evening breeze, was a figure, a park guest. And as I watched, its head snapped up, its dead eyes fixing on me. Its mouth opened, and a long, guttural moan drifted down from the heights. The Space Voyager, frozen, became an even more terrifying sentinel. It was a reminder of the sudden, brutal halt to joy, and now it was a perch for the dead. The implications were chilling. Were there more of them trapped on other rides, waiting? The sight spurred me on. I had to reach the castle. I had to find Lily. There was no time to think, no time to grieve for the world that was, only to survive. I sprinted towards the castle, my pipe a heavy swinging pendulum in my hand. The ground vibrated with another distant boom. The sky was now a deeper, bruised purple, the first stars beginning to prick through the gloom. Night was coming, and with it, a whole new level of fear. The castle walls of King Arthur's Quest were daunting, towering above me. The main entrance, a huge wooden drawbridge-like structure, was half closed, a gaping maw of darkness. I could hear sounds from within, shuffling, moaning. It wasn't the sanctuary I had hoped for. I veered to the right, following the perimeter of the castle. There had to be a service entrance, a smaller way in. Somewhere I could look for Lily without running head first into a horde. The back of the castle was less imposing, a plain stone wall punctuated by a single heavy steel door. A sign above it read, "Staff only, no entry." My kind of door. I tried the handle. Locked, of course. I slammed my shoulder into it, hoping for a weak latch, a miracle. Nothing. The door was solid. My eyes scanned the area. There was a small, unlit window high above the door, probably to a staff break room. Too high to reach. The moaning from within the castle grew louder, more insistent. They were aware of my presence. Time was running out. Then I saw it. Leaning against the wall, near a stack of discarded wooden pallets, was a heavy, rusted crowbar, a gift from a dying world. I dropped my pipe, grabbing the crowbar. The cold, rough metal felt good in my hands, substantial, dangerous. This was a weapon. This was a tool. This was hope. I inserted the claw end of the crowbar into the gap between the steel door and the frame, just above the handle. I pressed down, feeling the solid resistance of the steel. I gritted my teeth, put all my weight into it, pulling, levering, pushing. Muscles screamed in protest. The door groaned, a low metallic shriek. A loud thud from inside. They were right behind the door. I pulled again, harder. The crowbar slipped, scraping loudly against the metal, sending sparks flying in the dim light. I repositioned it, sweat dripping into my eyes. Another thud, stronger this time. The door vibrated. I let out a primal yell, a raw sound of desperation and fury, and pulled with every ounce of strength I had left. The metal shrieked. A loud crack echoed through the alley. The door buckled inward, the lock mechanism tearing free with a wrenching sound. The door swung open just a few inches, revealing a dark corridor beyond. And the first of them, a figure in a torn night costume, its plastic helmet askew, its face a gray, rotting mask, was lunging through the gap, its hands reaching. I didn't hesitate. I jammed the crowbar into the gap, pushing the door back against the charging zombie. It slammed shut with a clang, pinning the creature halfway, its head and one arm inside, its legs flailing uselessly outside. Its moans were muffled but persistent, a terrifying dirge. I had to get inside, now. I kicked at the door, forcing it open just enough to squeeze through, ignoring the trapped creature as I pushed past it, its decaying flesh brushing against my clothes. The smell was horrendous, a rotting sweetness that made my stomach churn. I was inside, in the bowels of King Arthur's Quest. The corridor was dark, lit only by emergency lights that flickered erratically, casting long, dancing shadows. The air was colder, damp, and smelled of old popcorn and something stale, metallic. The familiar, happy place was gone, replaced by a labyrinth of shadows and dread. I moved quickly down the corridor, the crowbar held tight in my hand. The moaning from the trapped zombie at the door was fading behind me, but new sounds were ahead, distant shuffling, faint growls. The castle wasn't empty, of course not. This was a zombie apocalypse, and I was in a theme park. Every corner, every shadow was a potential nightmare. The corridor opened into a larger, circular room. This looked like a loading area for the ride. Empty carts, shaped like medieval carriages, sat silent on their tracks. A massive control panel, its lights blinking erratically, hummed faintly in the center of the room. And there, in the middle of the room, was a small, pink boot. Lily's. My heart hammered. Lily? I called out, my voice cracking, barely a whisper. The room was mostly clear, no immediate threats. But the boot, it looked too big to have just fallen off. It looked like she'd kicked it off. I walked towards it, my eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. The carts, usually brightly lit and inviting, were now ominous, hulking shapes. A faint scratching sound came from behind one of the larger carts. I froze, crowbar raised. "Lily, is that you, sweetie?" No answer, only the scratching, slightly louder now, coming from under the cart. I approached slowly, my pulse thrumming in my ears. The space under the cart was dark, too dark to see clearly. I knelt, peering into the gloom. Two milky white eyes stared back at me. Not Lily's. It was small, child-sized. A child in a bright yellow Adventureland t-shirt, its face bruised and pale, its mouth a gaping, bloody hole. It launched itself forward with a terrifying growl, its small hands reaching, its teeth snapping. A zombie child. The horror of it was almost unbearable. My hand didn't hesitate. The crowbar swung down with a sickening crunch, connecting with its skull. The small body went limp, falling back into the shadows. I scrambled back, gasping for air, a wave of nausea washing over me. I had just killed a child. Even if it wasn't a child anymore, even if it was a monster, it had once been someone's kid, someone who had been enjoying a day at the theme park. My hands trembled uncontrollably. The weight of the crowbar suddenly felt like a ton of bricks. This was the new reality. Kill or be killed. And sometimes you had to kill the innocent, or what was left of them, to save the truly innocent, to save Lily. But where was she? The boot? The zombie child? She had been here. She had to have been. Had she been separated from this child zombie? Or had it been her friend? The thought was a dagger to the heart. My eyes scanned the room again. There was another door, a smaller one, marked emergency exit. It led into a maintenance shaft, probably. A safer bet than the main ride area. I checked the boot again. It was caked in mud. Not the mud from the enchanted forest, but something thicker, darker, like the kind of mud found in drainage pipes or... My eyes widened. A sewer grate. There was a large, rusted sewer grate in the corner of the room, near the emergency exit. It looked old, rarely used. Could Lily have gone down there? The thought sent a shiver of dread down my spine. Dark, cramped, possibly filled with horrors I couldn't even imagine. But it was also a hiding place. A place where a small, terrified child might seek refuge. I walked to the grate, kneeling down. The smell was awful, damp, metallic, putrid. But it was also familiar. Like something I'd smelled near the kiddie rides, near the broken water fountains. "Lily, are you down there, sweetie?" I whispered, my voice choked. My heart was pounding, a desperate hope mixed with profound fear. No answer. Only the distant, echoing drip of water and the scuttling of unseen things. I tried to lift the grate. It was heavy, rusted, bolted down. I jammed the crowbar into the gap, leveraging it, pulling. The metal groaned, but the bolts held fast. It wasn't going to open easily. A new sound echoed from deeper in the castle. A distinct, shuffling thud, getting closer. The moaning was louder. They were coming. Many of them. I had to make a choice. Try to force the grate open, risking being trapped here when they arrived, or head for the emergency exit and hope Lily had done the same. My eyes darted to Lily's boot. It was caked in that unique, dark mud. It wasn't the mud from the enchanted forest. It was from here. She had been here. And that meant she could have gone down that sewer grate. My decision was made. I dropped the crowbar for a moment, pulling at the bolts with my bare hands, trying to loosen them. My fingers slipped, scraped raw against the rusted metal. No use. I needed the crowbar. I grabbed the crowbar again, jamming it back under the grate. I pushed, pulled, leveraged, sweat dripping into my eyes, my muscles screaming. The bolts groaned, metal tearing against metal. The thudding of approaching feet was louder now, almost right outside the room. One bolt snapped with a sharp ping, then another. The grate shifted, just barely. Hope flared. "Mark, you idiot! Get out of here!" my mind screamed. "She's not down there. You're going to get yourself killed for nothing." But I couldn't leave. Not without knowing. Not without trying. A guttural growl came from the corridor entrance, too close. I looked up. 3 of them were entering the room, their blank eyes fixed on me. One was the night zombie, its helmet still askew. Another was a park staff member, her name tag Brenda visible through the grime. The third was a woman clutching a souvenir plush dragon. They saw me. Their moans rose, a hungry chorus. They started to shamble forward, gaining speed. Come on, I grunted, straining against the grate, putting every ounce of my dwindling strength into it. The last 2 bolts were stubborn, refusing to break. The crowbar was bending, groaning under the strain. The night was almost on me. Its rotting hand reached out, fingers clawing at the air. I pulled one last desperate time. The crowbar shrieked. Then the last 2 bolts gave way with a sickening scrape. The grate flew open, tearing free from the floor with a deafening clang. It clattered against the wall, sending vibrations through the entire room. A dark, gaping hole opened up beneath me. A ladder, rusted and slippery, led down into the blackness. The stench of sewage and damp earth rose up, overwhelming. The night zombie was upon me. I didn't have time to react. Its hands grabbed my shirt, its putrid breath washing over my face. I could feel the cold, clammy touch of its skin. I could see the milky film over its eyes, the hunger in its twisted face. Instinct took over. With a desperate lunge, I used its momentum, pulling it with me, and shoved it towards the open sewer grate. It stumbled, then pitched forward with a guttural shriek, tumbling down into the darkness, its moans quickly fading as it hit something wet and solid far below. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing the crowbar. The other 2 infected were almost on me. I swung the crowbar in a wide arc, catching Brenda in the head with a sickening thwack. She reeled but didn't fall. These things were relentless. The woman with the plush dragon lunged. I sidestepped, bringing the crowbar down on her exposed neck. A wet crack. She dropped, twitching, then went still. Brenda was back, moaning, clawing at the air. Her skull was dented, but she kept coming. I didn't hesitate this time. I brought the crowbar down again, harder, aiming for the head. This time she collapsed, her head cracking against the concrete floor. She twitched once, then was still. Silence. Heavy. Oppressive. Broken only by my ragged breathing and the distant moans of the infected from outside the room. I looked at the gaping maw of the sewer grate. The ladder disappeared into the inky blackness. I had no idea what was down there. But Lily's muddy boot, it pointed the way. She was either down there or she had passed through, and I had to follow. I grabbed the crowbar, took one last look at the dead zombies on the floor, at the silent, empty ride carts, and then, with a profound sense of dread, but also a fierce, desperate resolve, I started down the rusty ladder, descending into the dark, unknown depths of the theme park's underbelly. The final light of day was fading above me, swallowed by the grim reality of the zombie apocalypse. The cold, metallic rungs bit into my hands as I descended into the darkness. The stench intensified with every step, a noxious cocktail of stale water, raw sewage, and something else. Something sickly sweet and cloying, like rotten meat. My flashlight was dead. My phone was dead. I was descending into absolute blackness, guided only by the lingering scent and the desperate hope that Lily was down here, alive. My foot splashed into icy water. I was at the bottom. The water was up to my shins, freezing, creeping into my sneakers. The air was thick, heavy, pressing in on me, making each breath feel like an effort. I extended my arm, crowbar held out in front of me, feeling for solid ground. Nothing, just the endless, cold water. The darkness was absolute. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. My imagination, already frayed, began to conjure horrors in the inky blackness. What if there were infected down here? What if the water was full of them? What if Lily was... Lily? I whispered, my voice barely audible above the splashing of the water. It echoed strangely in the confined space, distorted and swallowed by the oppressive silence. No answer. Only the drip, drip, drip of water from unseen pipes and the insidious scuttling sound that was now my constant companion. I started to move forward, one agonizing step at a time, my feet shuffling through the cold water, feeling for obstacles. The crowbar was my eyes, my guide, probing the darkness ahead. The water was deeper in some places, up to my knees, making it harder to move. The current was weak but noticeable, pulling at my legs. This was a nightmare, a claustrophobic, sensory-depriving nightmare beneath a theme park. The sheer absurdity of it, the sickening contrast between the vibrant, joyful surface and this putrid underbelly was almost too much to bear. My foot snagged on something. I stumbled, nearly losing my balance, plunging my hand into the freezing water to catch myself. My fingers brushed against something soft, yielding. My heart leaped into my throat. What was that? I pulled my hand back instinctively, a jolt of pure terror shooting through me. I held the crowbar tighter, sweeping it in an arc around me. Nothing, just the water. My mind screamed at me, telling me to turn back, to find another way. But my heart, my father's heart, insisted I move forward. Lily. She was the only reason I was still moving. I pressed on, the seconds stretching into an eternity. The air was getting thicker, harder to breathe. I could feel invisible cobwebs brushing my face. The walls of the tunnel were slimy, cold. Then I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible sound ahead of me. A tiny, choked sob. My blood ran cold, then hot with a fierce surge of adrenaline. Lily. It had to be her. Lily, I called out, louder this time, my voice raw with emotion. Lily, is that you? The sobbing stopped abruptly. Then a small, terrified voice, barely a whisper, answered. Daddy, is that really you? Tears welled in my eyes, hot and stinging, despite the cold. Yes, baby. It's Daddy. I'm coming. Where are you? I'm scared, Daddy, she whimpered. It's dark and wet, and there's something else down here. My stomach clenched. Something else? What did she mean? Stay still, sweetie. Don't move. I'm almost there, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to project calm I didn't feel. I moved faster now, splashing through the water, crowbar still extended. The tunnel opened up slightly. I could make out a faint silvery sheen on the water ahead. It was light, a very faint light. It seemed to be coming from a break in the ceiling, perhaps a manhole cover ajar. As I neared the source of the light, I saw her. Lily. She was huddled on a small raised ledge just above the waterline, a tiny island of relative dryness. Her clothes were soaked, her pigtails plastered to her face. Her eyes, wide and terrified, were fixed not on me, but on the water around her. And that's when I saw it. The something else. Floating sluggishly in the water, caught against the wall of the tunnel, were several shapes. Humanoid shapes. Their limbs moved with the subtle current, their faces pale and bloated, their eyes glazed over. Undead. They were infected, would somehow fallen into the sewage system, carried here by the flow. 2, 3, maybe 4 of them. They were not active, not shambling, but they were there. And the sickly sweet smell was emanating from them. "Oh, God," I whispered, my breath catching in my throat. This was the horror Lily had seen. This was why she was terrified. Lily looked at me, her face pale. They're like the sick people, Daddy, but they don't move." "They're sleeping, sweetie," I said, trying to sound calm, trying to lie. They weren't sleeping. They were dead, but still dangerous, still infected. They could still grab. I reached the ledge, pulling myself up beside her. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close, trying to transfer some of my warmth, some of my strength, some of my resolve into her small, shivering body. "It's okay, baby. Daddy's here now. We're going to get out of here," I promised, burying my face in her hair. The truth was, I had no idea how. "I was so scared, Daddy," she sobbed. "I ran and ran, and then I saw a manhole, and it was open a little, and I heard the sounds of the bad people, so I went down the ladder. It was dark, and then I fell in the water, and then I saw them." She shuddered, pressing closer. My heart ached. My brave little girl. She had found a way to survive, a way to hide. The faint light from above illuminated the tunnel just enough to see the path ahead. The tunnel branched here, one path continuing straight, the other leading off to the left, towards what looked like a massive rusted gate. The main sewer line, perhaps? "We have to keep going, sweetie," I said, pulling away just enough to look at her. "We can't stay here. These things, they're everywhere. We need to find our way back to the outside." She nodded, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Okay, Daddy." A small flicker of her usual resilience returned. I looked at the gate. It was huge, heavy, and looked like it was designed to withstand a flood. No way I could open that with a crowbar. So, straight it was. The tunnel ahead was still dark, but at least it didn't have a giant, insurmountable obstacle blocking the way. But first, the floating dead. We couldn't just walk past them, not with Lily so close. "Okay, Lily, stay here for 1 second, okay? Daddy needs to make sure it's safe for us to walk," I said. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the inert forms in the water. I jumped back into the cold water, crowbar held ready. I approached the first of the floating infected, a man in a tattered park uniform. He looked like he'd been in the water for a while, his skin translucent and peeling. I nudged him gently with the crowbar. No response. I nudged him again, harder, pushing him away from the path. He drifted slowly, silently, a macabre puppet, towards the other side of the tunnel. I repeated the process with the others, pushing them one by one, creating a narrow, clear path for us to walk. It was unsettling pushing the dead. The cold water, the heavy silence, the faint smell of decay. It was a chore, but a necessary one. A chilling glimpse into the mundane horrors of this new world. When I was done, I pulled myself back onto the ledge, my teeth chattering from the cold. "Okay, sweetie, it's clear now. Hold Daddy's hand and we'll go very, very slowly, okay?" She nodded, wiping my outstretched hand, her small fingers wrapping around mine. We descended into the water, Lily clinging to my side, her eyes wide as she carefully avoided looking at the silently drifting dead. Each splash, each rustle of unseen rats made us jump. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, a winding, dark path through the heart of the earth. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only 10 minutes, the tunnel began to slope upwards. The water grew shallower, then disappeared altogether, replaced by a damp concrete floor. The air felt less oppressive, less thick, and the faint light from above grew stronger, painting the walls with a dim, gray luminescence. We were nearing another exit. Hope, fragile but persistent, flared again. The tunnel ended at another ladder, leading up to a manhole cover. This one looked newer, cleaner, less rusted. I could see the distinct outlines of the handle. It looked promising. "Okay, Lily," I whispered. "Daddy's going to go up first, just to check if it's safe. You stay right here, okay?" "Don't move until I say so." She nodded, clutching her plush unicorn, which had somehow survived the ordeal. I climbed the ladder, crowbar gripped in my teeth, my wet clothes heavy and cold. The top of the ladder was flush with the manhole cover. I reached up, grasping the handle. It was stiff, but it moved. I pushed up slowly, cautiously, feeling the resistance of the heavy metal. A faint sliver of moonlight appeared, then widened. I peered out, my eyes adjusting to the night. I was in an alleyway, a different one than before. This one was narrower, lined with dumpsters and overflowing trash cans. The air was cold, sharp, and smelled of decaying food and exhaust fumes. Not pleasant, but infinitely better than the sewer. I pulled myself up, careful not to make too much noise, and scanned the alley. It was empty. The distant sounds of moaning were still there, a chilling symphony, but nothing immediately present. The moon, almost full, cast long, distorted shadows. I pulled the manhole cover aside, placing it carefully on the ground, revealing the dark opening. "Okay, Lily, all clear. Come on up, sweetie." She emerged from the darkness, a small, wet, shivering figure, but her eyes held a new spark of determination. She climbed the ladder quickly, eager to escape the horror of the tunnel. As she reached the top, I pulled her out, hugging her close, then replaced the manhole cover. Safety, for now. We were in another back alley. My geographical sense was completely shot. I had no idea where we were in relation to the main park or the King Arthur's Quest castle. All I knew was we were outside, under the vast, terrifying expanse of the night sky, and we were still alive. "Okay, Lily," I said, my voice hoarse. "We need to find a place to hide for the night, somewhere warm, somewhere safe." She nodded, shivering, her small hand finding mine. I scanned the alley. One of the doors, a large metal one with a faded Loading Dock 7 sign above it, was slightly ajar. A sliver of light, faint and yellowish, escaped from within. My gut screamed caution. Light meant people. People meant noise. Noise meant infected. But light also meant hope, warmth, perhaps other survivors. "Stay close to Daddy, okay?" I whispered to Lily. "And be very, very quiet." I pushed the door open slowly, crowbar held ready. The light was coming from a single, flickering fluorescent bulb inside. It illuminated a large, dusty warehouse filled with stacks of cardboard boxes, old ride parts, and discarded costumes. The air smelled of stale cardboard and something metallic, like old machinery. And there, in the middle of the warehouse, huddled around a small, flickering fire in a makeshift barrel, were 3 figures. 2 men, one older and burly, the other younger and wiry. And a woman, her face streaked with dirt, her hair a wild mess. They were looking at us, their faces etched with suspicion and fear, their hands gripping makeshift weapons. We had found survivors, and they had found us. The theme park zombie apocalypse had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. The open loop of the unknown stretched before us, daunting and perilous. What kind of people were they, friend or foe? This decision, this moment, could mean salvation or another brutal end to our desperate escape. The burly man, his face scarred and grim, stood up slowly, clutching a heavy monkey wrench. His eyes, wary and distrustful, fixed on my crowbar, then on Lily. The flickering firelight danced across their faces, highlighting shadows, obscuring intentions. "Who are you?" he grunted, his voice rough, gravelly. "And why do you have a kid out here?" My mouth was dry. My throat felt like sandpaper. "My name's Mark. This is my daughter, Lily. We got separated. We're just trying to find somewhere safe. We mean you no harm." My gaze swept over them, trying to gauge their demeanor, their threat level. The younger man, his face scarred and grim, stood up slowly, clutching a heavy monkey wrench. his eyes, wary and distrustful, fixed on my crowbar, then on Lily. The flickering firelight danced across their faces, highlighting shadows, obscuring intentions. "Who are you?" he grunted, his voice rough, gravelly. "And why do you have a kid out here?" My mouth was dry. My throat felt like sandpaper. "My name's Mark. This is my daughter, Lily. We got separated. We're just trying to find somewhere safe. We mean you no harm." My gaze swept over them, trying to gauge their demeanor, their threat level. The younger man held a sharpened rebar. The woman, a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire. They were ready for a fight. Lily, still clinging to my leg, looked up at me, then at the strangers, her eyes wide with fear. She buried her face back in my side, shivering. "A kid, huh?" The burly man, who I now realized had a heavy chain wrapped around his other arm, chuckled, a humorless, brittle sound. "In Adventureland, you picked a hell of a day for a family outing, didn't you?" "It was her birthday," I mumbled, the words feeling utterly meaningless in the face of the apocalypse. The memory of the happy morning, the brightly colored banners, the smell of fresh popcorn was a stark, painful contrast to the grim reality of the warehouse. The older woman, who had been silently watching us, finally spoke, her voice surprisingly soft. "They're just scared, Frank. They're cold and wet. Look at the little one." She looked at Lily, a flicker of something, perhaps pity, in her tired eyes. Frank, the burly man, narrowed his eyes, still holding the monkey wrench ready. "Pity's a luxury we can't afford anymore, Martha. You know that, especially with mouths to feed." The younger man, lean and jittery, nodded. "He's right. Every new face is another risk, another drain on supplies." My heart sank. This was it. The impossible choice. Do I fight them? Do I try to appeal to their humanity? Do I beg? Or do I just turn around and walk back into the night, into the unknown, with Lily, praying we find something better? "We don't have any supplies," I said, trying to sound honest, transparent. "Just the clothes on our backs. We just need shelter for the night. We can leave in the morning. We don't want any trouble." Martha, the woman, looked at Frank. "Frank, she's just a kid. It's freezing out there. What harm can they do for one night?" Frank hesitated, his gaze sweeping over Lily again. The silence stretched, thick with tension. I could feel Lily trembling against me. Finally, he lowered the monkey wrench slightly. "All right," he grunted, a grudging concession. "One night. You stay on that side of the warehouse. Don't touch anything, don't make any noise, and you're gone at first light. Understood?" "Understood," I said, relief washing over me, sudden and overwhelming. I nodded, pulling Lily towards the far wall, as far away from them as possible. We huddled against the cold concrete, Lily still tucked tightly into my side. The warmth from their fire was a cruel tease, just out of reach. But we were inside. We were safe from the things outside. For now. The younger man, whose name I didn't know, sat back down by the fire, poking at the flames with his rebar. "You lucky man," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Most people don't get a second chance." I knew what he meant. Most people were already gone. Most people had succumbed to the horror of the zombie apocalypse. Lily, exhausted and traumatized, slowly drifted off to sleep in my arms, her head nestled against my chest. Her breathing was shallow but steady. I held her close, listening to the crackle of the fire, the distant moans of the infected, and the chilling silence from the three strangers. Sleep wouldn't come for me. My mind raced, replaying the day's horrors, wrestling with the overwhelming guilt of our separation, the violence I'd committed. I had killed, I had fought, I had survived, all for her. My eyes scanned the warehouse again. It was filled with boxes, souvenir merchandise, ride components, cleaning supplies. This was the logistical heart of the theme park, a potential treasure trove of resources, or a death trap. I wondered what these people's stories were. How long had they been here? What had they seen? Were they good people or just desperate? Could I trust them? Could anyone be trusted in this new, brutal world? The moon had risen higher, its pale light filtering through grimy skylights. The warehouse, once a place of mundane work, was now a refuge, a fragile bubble of humanity in a world gone mad. As the hours crawled by, the sounds from outside the warehouse seemed to intensify, the moaning growing louder, closer. They were drawn to the light, to the lingering scent of the living. The structure of the warehouse was solid, but nothing was truly safe anymore. Just before dawn, the familiar, terrifying sound returned. A distant, muffled boom, stronger this time, making the concrete floor vibrate. Then another. And another. Explosions. Closer. The three survivors around the fire stirred, looking at each other with grim resignation. Frank cursed under his breath. Martha pressed her lips into a thin line. The younger man clutched his rebar, his eyes wide with fear. "They're bombing the city," Frank muttered, his voice low. "Trying to contain it. Fat lot of good that'll do." The bombing was getting closer. The entire building vibrated with the impact. Dust rained down from the ceiling. A chill, colder than the morning air, settled over me. This warehouse, our temporary sanctuary, would not last. I looked down at Lily, still sleeping fitfully in my arms. I had promised her safety. I had to keep that promise. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in pale shades of gray and pink. It was time to go. Time to face the new day. Time to leave this fragile sanctuary. But leave where? The outside world was chaos. The theme park, once a place of joy, was now a graveyard. The city, once vibrant, was now being bombed into oblivion. There was no plan, only instinct, only the desperate, burning need to survive. As the first weak rays of sunlight filtered into the warehouse, the moaning from outside suddenly grew frantic, frenzied. The explosions were a terrifying punctuation mark to the symphony of the dead. This wasn't just a new day. This was a new level of hell, and we were about to walk right back into it. "Get ready," Frank said, his voice grim, his eyes meeting mine across the dusty expanse of the warehouse. First light always brings the hungry ones. The implied question hung heavy in the air. Are you ready to face them? I looked at Lily, still sleeping, innocent to the horrors that awaited. I had to be. I had no choice. The zombie apocalypse was far from over. The metallic clang of an alarm, loud and jarring, suddenly ripped through the air from somewhere deep within the warehouse. It wasn't an emergency alarm, but one of those old-fashioned mechanical ones, like a security trigger. It shrieked, relentless, grating on every nerve. Frank, Martha, and the younger man, whose name I still didn't know, snapped their heads towards the sound, their faces etched with a mixture of anger and raw fear. "Damn it!" Frank roared, scrambling to his feet, clutching his monkey wrench. What was that? The alarm, however, had done its job. The cacophony of moans from outside the warehouse instantly changed, escalating into a frenzied, ravenous chorus. The sounds of shuffling feet grew louder, faster. They were drawn to the noise, like moths to a flame. We had been exposed. "Someone broke in," the younger man yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "They're inside." My heart hammered against my ribs. Inside? After all this, to be trapped in here with another unknown threat, just as the infected outside were swarming? This was the ultimate nightmare. "Stay here, Lily," I whispered, gently laying her down against the wall. She stirred, whimpering softly, but didn't fully wake. I clutched my crowbar, my eyes darting frantically towards the source of the alarm. It seemed to be coming from the far end of the warehouse, near a section marked Ride Parts Storage. Frank and his group were already moving, cautiously making their way towards the sound, their makeshift weapons held ready. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. My first instinct was to protect Lily, to find a hiding spot. But if there was someone else inside, they might draw the attention of the outside horde, or worse, they might be hostile. We were exposed either way. I had to know. I had to act. "Wait," I called out, my voice strained. "Let's stick together. We don't know what's in there." Frank glanced back at me, a flicker of grudging respect in his eyes, or perhaps just pragmatism. "Fine, but you keep that kid safe, and you follow my lead." I nodded, moving to join them, keeping my distance but staying within their protective formation. The younger man, jittery and breathing hard, kept glancing over his shoulder at the main loading dock door, where the sounds of the infected were becoming a terrifying crescendo. The alarm shrieked on, an incessant, piercing scream that seemed to vibrate in my bones. It was a beacon, drawing every single infected in the area directly to our location. We were sitting ducks. We moved slowly, cautiously, past towering stacks of boxes filled with plush toys and souvenir t-shirts. The air in this section was heavy with the smell of new plastic and cheap dyes, a bizarre contrast to the horror unfolding. "See anything?" Martha whispered, her voice tight with tension. "Nothing," Frank muttered, his eyes narrowed, scanning the shadowed aisles between the boxes. "Could be a rat set it off, or a stray zombie got in somehow." As we rounded a corner, a shadow detached itself from behind a mountain of boxes labeled Adventureland Collectibles Limited Edition. Not a rat, not a zombie, a man. Tall, gaunt, dressed in tattered, expensive-looking clothes. He was holding a small silver pistol, his hand shaking, his eyes wide with wild, desperate fear. He looked almost as terrified of us as we were of him. "Stay back," he croaked, raising the pistol, his voice high-pitched and panicked. "Don't come any closer." Frank stopped dead, raising his monkey wrench. "Who the hell are you, and what did you do?" I just needed supplies," the man stammered, his eyes darting frantically between our weapons. "I set off the alarm by accident." "I swear." "An accident?" the younger man exploded, his face red with fury. "You just brought every single one of those things right to our front door, you idiot!" The man, clearly at his breaking point, began to back away slowly, his pistol wavering. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I need to get to the main gate. My car's out there. I just need to get out." "The main gate's a death trap, moron," Frank snarled. "There's hundreds of them out there by now." The man, ignoring him, started to turn, intent on fleeing. He tripped over a loose box, falling hard, his pistol clattering across the concrete floor, skidding into a dark corner. The alarm chose that moment to sputter, then die. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the noise, broken only by the deafening roar of the outside horde, which was now slamming into the loading dock doors, making the entire warehouse tremble. The distant explosions continued, closer, more violent. The man scrambled on the floor, trying to reach his pistol. Frank looked at him with disdain, then at the shuddering loading dock doors. "Forget him," he growled. "We need to reinforce that door, now." My eyes, however, were still fixed on the man, and on the section of the warehouse he had come from, the ride parts storage. "Wait," I said, a thought crystallizing in my mind. "What if we don't need to reinforce it? What if we can use this place to our advantage?" Frank turned to me, his brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "This is a theme park warehouse," I explained, my mind racing, fueled by a frantic burst of adrenaline. "There have to be vehicles in here, golf carts, small maintenance trucks, something to get us out of here, something fast." Frank considered it for a moment, then shook his head. "Too much noise, they'd hear us, and those things aren't armored, we'd be ripped apart." "Not in the open," I argued, pointing towards the ride parts storage section. "But this is amazing here. If we could get to a vehicle, we could crash through a weaker wall, get out before they knew what hit them." Martha looked at me, a flicker of interest in her tired eyes. "He might be right, Frank. Those explosions are getting too close. We're not going to survive a direct hit. We need to move. and a vehicle might be our only chance to cover ground fast. Frank weighed his options. The loading dock doors were groaning under the relentless assault. Splinters of wood were starting to fly. The structure wasn't going to hold for long. The man on the floor, still terrified, was trying to crawl towards his pistol. He whimpered, almost silently. "Fine," Frank finally said, a grim resolve hardening his features. "But you're leading the way, Mark. You and your crowbar. And you make sure that idiot doesn't mess things up again." He gestured to the fallen man with his monkey wrench. I nodded, clutching my crowbar. This was it, our desperate gamble. We moved towards the ride part storage section. The man, now identified as Arthur, scrambling to follow us, his eyes wide with a desperate, pathetic hope. He was a liability, but in the chaos, we couldn't spare the time to deal with him. The ride part storage was a cavernous space, filled with huge, bizarre pieces of machinery. Giant gears, sections of track, dismembered animatronic figures. It was a junkyard of broken dreams, lit only by the faint light filtering from the loading dock and the distant explosions. The air was heavy with the smell of metal and grease. "Look for anything with wheels," I instructed, my voice low and urgent. "Something we can hotwire, something sturdy." We fanned out, moving quickly through the labyrinthine aisles. Lily was still asleep, miraculously, nestled against the wall where I'd left her, a tiny island of peace in a sea of chaos. I had to get back to her. Arthur, the panicked man, stumbled through the aisles, his fear making him clumsy. "I can't see anything. It's too dark." "Quiet," Frank hissed. "You want to attract more of them?" Suddenly, the younger man, who I now learned was named Kyle, shouted, "Over here! I found something!" We converged on him. He was standing in front of a heavy tarp-covered vehicle. Frank ripped the tarp off with a grunt, revealing a small yellow utility cart. It looked like one of the maintenance vehicles built for hauling equipment. It was sturdy, with a small flatbed in the back. Not fast, but robust. "Perfect," I breathed. "Does it have keys?" Kyle checked the ignition. "No, looks like they took them, but I think I can hotwire it. I used to work on cars." "Then do it," Frank urged, looking back at the loading dock, which was groaning louder now, wood splintering with each impact. "We don't have much time." Kyle immediately set to work, pulling wires from beneath the dashboard, his hands flying with surprising speed. Arthur, meanwhile, was nervously pacing, wringing his hands, looking more terrified than useful. Martha and Frank stood guard, their weapons ready, scanning the dark corners of the warehouse. I kept my eyes on Lily, praying she would remain asleep, oblivious to the terror that surrounded us. "Almost got it," Kyle grunted, a spark flying from the wires. "Just a few more seconds." Then the loading dock door gave way with a sickening crash. Wood exploded inward, sending shards flying. The entire warehouse shook, and through the gaping hole poured the first wave of the infected, their moans a triumphant roar. "Go, go, go!" Frank yelled, his face grim. He raised his monkey wrench, preparing for the inevitable. Martha gripped her barbed wire bat, her knuckles white. I ran to Lily, scooping her up into my arms. She woke with a startled cry, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Daddy, what's happening?" "It's okay, baby. We're going for a ride. Hold on tight," I said, my voice trying to be reassuring, but it was thin, strained. "It's starting!" Kyle screamed. "Get in! Get in!" The utility cart's engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life with a defiant growl. Smoke billowed from the exhaust pipe. Frank and Martha jumped into the back of the cart, their weapons raised. Arthur, the terrified man, scrambled into the passenger seat, his face ashen. I climbed into the driver's seat, Lily clutched to my chest, and jammed my foot on the accelerator. The utility cart lurched forward, surprisingly fast, cutting a swath through the debris of the warehouse. The roar of the engine was deafening, a challenge to the moans of the infected. "Where are we going?" Frank yelled over the noise as he swung his wrench, fending off an infected that had managed to get too close. "Back wall!" I shouted, pointing to a section of the warehouse where the wall looked thinner, less reinforced. "It's our only way out!" The infected were pouring in now, drawn by the noise, by the light. They swarmed the aisles, their gray forms blurring into a tide of death. I slammed the accelerator, the cart roaring, picking up speed. Arthur screamed beside me, his eyes squeezed shut. Kyle, now in the back with Frank and Martha, was throwing boxes, creating obstacles for the pursuing horde. We hit the wall with a sickening crunch. Wood splintered, plaster showered down. The cart lurched but didn't stop. We burst through, shattering the wall, driving into the cold, open night. We were out. We were alive. We were in the parking lot. The vast expanse of the Adventureland parking lot, now a desolate wasteland of abandoned cars and wandering dead, stretched before us. The bombings were closer now, the ground vibrating with each impact. Smoke billowed on the horizon. The sky was a bruised apocalyptic tapestry. "Which way, Mark?" Frank yelled, his voice raw. I looked at Lily, still clutching her unicorn, her face buried against my shoulder. I looked at the burning city, at the endless horde of the dead, at the faces of these strangers, my temporary companions in this desperate flight. "West!" I shouted over the roar of the engine, pointing towards the faint, distant glow of the highway. "Away from the city! Away from here!" The utility cart careened through the parking lot, bouncing over discarded cars and the bodies of the dead. The infected gave chase, their moans a terrifying chorus, but we were faster. For now. As we reached the main road, the full horror of the zombie apocalypse was laid bare. Cars lay abandoned, some burning, others overturned. Bodies, both still and shambling, littered the asphalt. The world had ended. But we were still moving. We were still fighting. And as I gripped the steering wheel, Lily's small, warm body pressed against mine, I knew I would keep driving, keep fighting, keep surviving. The utility cart roared down the highway, leaving the burning theme park behind us, a monument to a world that was no more. The bombings behind us were closer, louder. The road ahead was dark, unknown. We were survivors, for now, in a world gone mad. But what horrors awaited us on the open road? What new, impossible choices would we have to make? The road ahead was long, and the true cost of survival in this zombie apocalypse was only just beginning to be counted. The engine coughed, a terrifying skip in its rhythm, and I gripped the wheel tighter. We were still alive, but for how much longer?